Good afternoon and welcome to this inaugural professorial lecture. Unusually and very excitingly, I think, it's a joint inaugural presented by Professor Bond and Professor Professor Alex Ding, both of whom have recently been promoted to full professorships in the University of Leeds' Language Centre, which is part of the University's School of Languages, Cultures and Societies. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Professor Andrew Thorpe. I'm the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Arts, Humanities and Cultures, of which the Centre and the School are both very important parts. It forced me to introduce the speakers to you. Some of you will know them very well, others of you won't know them as well. So just to give a bit of detail before they start their lecture. Starting then with Alex Ding, came to the Language Centre at the University of Leeds in 2015 from the University of Nottingham, having been appointed Director of Scholarship and Director of the Centre for Excellence in Language Teaching. In the last 9 years, he's led on various significant initiatives to enhance the visibility and access to scholarship and pedagogic research, and research specifically about language teaching, both in the Language Centre and in the wider school of LCS. He was instrumental, for example, in developing and launching the Language Scholar Journal, a really important in-house publication. The journal has provided a supportive platform through which colleagues can reflect and write on aspects of their work in student education. It also attracts contributions nationally and internationally. He's also Joint Programme Director with Bond of a new online Masters in Teaching English for academic purposes. As I mentioned earlier, prior to working at Leeds, Alex worked at the University of Nottingham, there for 14 years and led scholarship in the Centre for English Language Education. He also set up and led an MA in Teaching English for academic purposes, supervised numerous MA, ED and PhD students, and taught on a wide range of English for academic purposes programs. He has extensive experience of teaching English for specific purposes in various prestigious French higher education institutions. Alex co-wrote with Ian Bruce the influential book, The English for Academic Purposes Practitioner, Operating on the Edge of Academia in 2017, and has written numerous other publications, chapters and articles on EAP and practitioner identities. He's written widely on Pierre Bourdieu and social theory approaches to language education and English for academic purposes. Alex has always been motivated by collaboration with colleagues. He's been keen to establish and encourage a culture of shared scholarly practice and has contributed significantly to the development of colleagues' careers and to the reputation of the Language Centre, both nationally and internationally. Bond has been at the Language Centre since 2001. In her time at Leeds, she's contributed hugely to the Centre's growth and the development in the field of English for academic purposes. After being one of the first Light Fellows in 2016, he published a much cited volume on the role of language in internationalised higher education. That book, Making Language Visible in the University, English for Academic Purposes and Internationalisation, was published in 2020 and has been followed by a number of other important publications. He's published and collaborated on several research projects, including ways of capturing the impact and value of EAP work across various disciplines. In both her pedagogic practice and in her research endeavours, she's been instrumental in raising awareness of how embedded and content-based academic language teaching can benefit students. He understands very well the challenges, constraints and opportunities of working in large institutions and the role of EAP work within higher education. Like Alex, her approach to teaching, learning and scholarship has been focused on collaboration and enhancing not only her own career, but those of others she's worked with. Bea has been a major figure in the development and smooth running of the Language Centre, as I indeed know from her contributions in recent years. Over several periods during her long career at the university, she stepped in as Centre Director at various points, as well as being the Deputy Director for many years. She supported the centre director and the head of school in ensuring the smooth running of our language education work, and critically, in ensuring better conditions and career development for her colleagues, advocating strongly for those in more precarious working situations. She's driven by an ethical approach in all her work, and this has gained her the respect and admiration of colleagues both in the centre and beyond. She's currently co-programme director with Alex on the online MAT, and her work has been recognised nationally, and she is a National Teaching Fellow. And I think the promotion of both these colleagues to grade 10 is a testament to their hard work, to their commitment, but also, I may say, to the determination that we have in this faculty, in this university, to give people the opportunity in the Language Centre to enjoy the full possibilities of the different ranges of grades that are open to academic colleagues across the university. So now, please join me in welcoming Professor Bond and Professor Dean for their joint inaugural lecture, Language and Legitimation in Higher Education. Right.
Okay. So I start, it's a bit of a sort of team kind of relay race, well, not relay race, we're sort of going to alternate between us. So it's not me for half of the time and then Alex, and sort of two separate things. We've tried very hard to kind of integrate the things that we've got to say so that we kind of work together. A little bit like Tweedledum and Tweedledee, we have gone a little bit down a rabbit hole with the Alice in Wonderland theme a little bit, so bear with us if it gets a bit too much. I'm going to start by a preamble. I think every time Alex and I do a talk, we always start with a bit of preamble, bit of context setting and explanation as to why we're going to say all of the other things that we're going to say. One thing that we haven't got that we almost always start with is acknowledgements of the work of other people that we've collaborated with. We felt at this point that we would just have too many acknowledgements, and we'd be standing here for 40 minutes with like an Oscar speech of thank yous to everybody. And I think pretty much everybody that's in this room and online are the acknowledgements that we would like to give. I think most of the people that have come today are people that have influenced our work, that we've worked with in some way, shape or form. So apart from, I think, one person who we are going to highlight and is on some of your bingo cards, we're not going to kind of name the rest of the names of people. It's a funny thing, is an inaugural speech. We've not given one before. We're never going to give one again. And when we were talking together, we didn't really know what an inaugural was supposed to look like, particularly when there's two people, and particularly when we're not on research contracts. We are teachers, practitioners, scholars on student education contracts. And usually an inaugural, we asked AI what an inaugural should look like. I did find a chapter in a book that kind of gave a genre analysis of an Oxford inaugural. And it kind of said that there's a lot of niceties, a lot of it of sort of the story of your life and your professional life, and then the sort of the highlights of your work. We're kind of not really going to do that in the same way because there's two of us, and we're not really that interested in talking about our personal kind of trajectories. We don't think that they should be something that is exemplified and kind of repeated. We hope that other people have different paths and smoother paths. But I suppose there are things that people are coming expecting to hear from us. The last couple of days, as people have sent us kind of good luck wishes and kind of telling us we're going to be great, the expectations that we think you've got have sort of heightened a little bit. And I did start to wonder when we were talking about it, what would be on your bingo card for a B in Alex talk. I'm going to explain. In front of you in the room, and I think online you've been sent the master sheet because you can't play along. My classroom management techniques didn't work. I put them at the front. There's gaps at the front. I've had to hand them out at the back. Most of you should be able to see a bingo card or dingo card. Alex is, those of you that know him well and have worked with him, is infamous for his slightly obtuse academic vocabulary sometimes. It's very specific, very precise. It explains exactly what he means, but he's had to educate most of us, I think, that work with him as to the meaning of some of them by using them in context, which all good teachers do. So those of you that have got access to a bingo card, they are different. They're all different. The teacher in me couldn't have you not actively participating in some way. My husband calls it parlour games. The university would call it active learning. Tick off the words as you hear them, but Alex doesn't know what the words are. So they're my bingo cards. And the slides, the first sentence up there, these are quote Alex quotes. My reaction was intimist was not on my bingo card. But there we go. So we're hopefully meeting the genre expectations of an inaugural, but also the way that we teach our students in English for academic purposes is to help them understand the genre of academic communication, of the expectations of things that they're asked to do by their lecturers. The aim is for them to understand how to play the game initially so that they have access to those rules. The ultimate aim, we would hope, is that they can then break the rules and kind of disrupt them a little bit. And I think that probably, particularly with Alex, that's a bit of what you're expecting. So hopefully we're going to do both. So the joint inaugural, the next session, I told you I would talk about this forever. Partly I did not want to do one by myself. But I think also the main reason that we wanted to do a joint inaugural is because all of our work in the Language Centre, the two of us, has been collaborative. And again, this quote from Wackham and Borgia that you may or may not be able to read and understand, to me, means that we are here, and it's why I've been really nervous, more nervous than I have about any talk. We're representing our colleagues here. I would quite like you all to be standing here with us, but it's nice to see you all smiling in front of me. That the things that we've achieved, we haven't achieved in isolation, that it's the work of collaboration all the way through. And I think this is where some of you will see that on your bingo cards, you've got a name that isn't an obscure name, but it's not as a name that's as celebrated as we think it should be, and that's of Ian Bruce. And I think particularly for Alex, and he will talk later about the work that he's done with Ian, he has influenced our thinking and worked really, really kindly and carefully with us. So he's the one acknowledgement I think that we want to kind of really pick out. And he, for us, also exemplifies that kind of collaborative work that we think is so important. You can't do student education, you can't do scholarship, you can't work, particularly in English for academic purposes, without collaborating, because the language that we work with doesn't exist in isolation. Okay, you don't get to tick the words off when I use them, only when Alex uses them. It has to be spoken. Yes. But by me using them, you can see what a good teacher is, because they're words that I've not known before, most of them. So the next question, why Pharmakon? This isn't in the title, but it was in the abstract that we wrote to kind of sell the inaugural. With this, Alex has used it in his writing, so have I, as a metaphor, but both of us are drawn on the work of Dover Turner, who I think also uses the metaphor of Pharmakon for academic literacies, for English for academic purposes, and for language in the academy. Pharmakon basically is something that is both a poison and a cure. So it's a contradiction in nature. It can also be a charm, and it can be a remedy. And it is how we think about the work that we do in EAP, that it's invisible quite often. Language is not seen as something that is part of academic work, because it's, Joe Turner uses the phrase of pedagogy by osmosis. It's just assumed that students are going to be able to operate in that language until it becomes a poison, a problem. And that's when the Language Centre EAP tutors are asked to get involved, and we're suddenly seen as this amazing cure. And the work that we have tried to do throughout our careers, I think, is to push the sort of idea that we can be a cure, but we actually need to be more of a charm working alongside the disciplines, and language has to be seen as visible before it's seen as deficit. So we're moving away from what John Swales talks about as the ivory ghetto of remediation towards something that is kind of done in collaboration and seen properly. And that is why, I suppose, we've got the question around legitimation, that language needs to be legitimised. It needs to be seen as something that is valid and is equal in status to all of the other disciplinary knowledge that students are working towards. Is there anything that you want to say? Have I talked for long enough?
Not if it's on the bingo card.
Okay. So this is meeting genre expectations. We're going to tell you what we're going to say for the rest of it. I call it a MAD diagram, and Alex is going to talk about this complex diagram. Those of you that work on the MA in teaching EAP will recognise it because it's what we've used as a structure to organise the way that we think about the MA and all of the modules on it. It's something that Alex has developed, I think, again, in work in collaboration with Ian Bruce, that's looking at what EAP is and how it fits, and he will talk more about it. And then we've divided it up into the sort of two main parts of our work, really, the practices, the education itself, and the scholarship, hopefully showing how they connect together. And then really vitally at the end, we're going to look at the ethics of the work that we do. And now I shall hand over to you to talk about your complex.
Thank you.
This handheld needs to be held much closer to you.
Oh, right, okay.
Just so you feel like because it makes a difference to people at home. Is that okay?
Yep. No idea what I'm doing.
I'd put it on you like there.
What?
I think so.
Ooh.
We'll see you hear you kind of breathing.
This is why we're doing it together. Thank you.
How many professors does it take to? So there.
Thank you very much. Okay, so Alice, are you both?
No, you don't need to use the handheld if we've got the lapel.
Right, okay. So I'm going to try and look at this diagram and explain it to you a little bit, particularly for people that perhaps are less well aware of the kind of work we do within English for academic purposes. I'm going to focus on initially what you could call the outward-facing role of the AP, which is basically orientated towards the disciplines. So our work essentially consists in understanding communication practices within academia. If you don't know what we do, that's essentially what we look at. The field or discipline of the AP largely focuses on the legitimised and legitimising genres and discourses, which is, this is the biggest diagram I'm going to see at the bottom right. So we tend to look at what are the communication practices within and across disciplines, what makes language visible to us and to our students. However, what we're trying to also think is it's axiomatic that the core, if contested knowledge base of the AP consists in those three dimensions. So you've got genre and discourse, you've got the epistemologies of the disciplines, and you've got the cultural, social aspects of the values of disciplines. So those three dimensions constitute what we think is the knowledge base for EAP practices, at least the core knowledge base. They're often considered discretely, so as separate entities, philosophical, social, linguistic. And how the three of those interact is rather complex, but often considered discretely, so it's complicated to look at this. Ian and I, which I'll talk about a bit later, are looking at a kind of synthesis of those three, so some of our next publication will be developing that. So essentially, the knowledge base consists of those three dimensions, and practitioners need to be able to understand and operationalize this knowledge with students in classrooms. So the kind of reservoir of knowledge, or the fund or the bank of knowledge that practitioners need to bring to to the curriculum, to their classes, involves being able to draw on those three dimensions. Now, universities, colleagues sometimes hedging there, but they tend to perhaps think of EAP practitioners as some form of language fixers, as being mentioned, the pharmaconic nature of it means you come to the language centre, a bit like a mechanic, you kind of give proverbial student a kick and change something and off they go. This is not what we do. It's a very highly skilled practice. We provide what you might call a very specialised perspective and disciplines. We try and reveal what's included, what's tacit, the practices of language communication, and the ideologies that underpin language. We do that for all academic disciplines. This is really hard to do. Unfortunately, EAP is one of the kind of professions where it's very, very easy to do it badly and extremely difficult to do it expertly. So EAP for us is far more complex than the kind of notion of being able to just fix language. It does require an awful lot, and I think it's fair to say that neither of us would consider ourselves as highly skilled in this. It's an ongoing process. Our colleagues work in the disciplines. I can see that some of them sitting here, and they can attest to that fact that it causes a lot of existential angst trying to work out what on earth is going on in disciplines in the kind of depth that's required to fully understand it. So it's not an easy job. So the outward-facing aspect is generally what's considered to be where EAP operates. What we've tried to do is to fully understand reflexively what EAP is about, and that requires going the other side, where we understand the genres and disciplines. I can see my wife ticking off the dingo card. It must be so bloody predictable. Anyway, can't change. Slightly disconcerting. So you've got the genres and discourses of EAP. You've got the epistemologies that exist within EAP, what's valued, and also you've got the cultures and values and practices, sociologically speaking. This is really where our work together tries to encompass all those dimensions. Now, we're not megalomaniacs, we do focus on some more than others. That's essentially what EAP for us is about. So, thank you. I want to talk about the reflexive side of EAP, and Bea will talk probably in a couple of minutes a little bit more about the kind of outward facing. That's not because I do the reflexive stuff and Bea does actually important stuff. We had to divide it up some way. So when we talk about a reflexive orientation to EAP, what we're doing is considering EAP as a social field, much like any other, with its distribution of power and its monopolies, its struggles and strategies, interests and profits. So we look at EAP sociologically. And then there's something, I don't know if this will be on the dingo card, but I like this word anamnesia, which I can't say. It's a difficult word. It has many different meanings, but one of them that's relevant to us means recollection. It means also a patient's account of the medical records. So a reflexive orientation is taking stock of the ills and the problems within the field and discipline of EAP. That's what we're trying to achieve. If you look at the in the ideational domain, you can tick that off. You've probably got kind of official accounts of what EAP is, and they tend to be a kind of teleology of progress, of developments of different ideas. None of that is a social history of EAP. It's simply a kind of, in this period, we developed this theory, then this one, and so on, as if it kind of going towards some greater good. we wanted to look at the material conditions in which EAP practitioners operate. So reflexivity for us is a kind of orientation towards the field, which in essence is trying to understand the material conditions that shape the practices within EAP. We wanted to do that in order to kind of undertake a slightly painful socioanalysis of the field, which is also in work I've done with Letitia, a form of auto-analysis. So it's a bit like psychoanalysis as well. There are painful things when you look at the field of EAP. So reflexivity tends towards critique. It tends towards disillusionment, disenchanting, and to see things as they really are. This might seem overly depressive, and I think occasionally I get accused of that. But my conviction is, and I think would be as well, you have to look things as they are before you can transform them. There's no point in having false illusions about what we do. We have to face what we do, look at the limitations ethically, pedagogically, intellectually, all the different ways in which there are shortcomings if we're going to overcome them. We can't overcome them without facing it first. There we are. And then it's over to you.
Okay.
And B is going to perhaps orientate our work towards from critique to actually what we've done.
Is that mic better? Alex's mic or?
Yeah.
Sorry. There are two, but. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so given what Alex has said about needing to understand where we are, as we did that, it became clear, and I think through the project that I did with Light, that quite often EAP practitioners, because one of the foundational premises of our practice is that we meet the needs of students and of the disciplines that the students are working with, that sometimes allows us to abdicate responsibility and can make us feel quite agentless because we're sort of, people have used metaphors of service in multiple ways. But by abdicating responsibility, we then abdicate the responsibility to know things about the knowledge base that we're supposed to draw on. And we find that a lot of the work that we do is atheoretical, is lacking knowledge, and is just based on experience. It's what we've always done and it works. And maybe it does work, but we felt that we needed to be able to prove it and sort of show it. And we need people that can do that, that work in EAP, in order to have the academic authority to work in collaboration and in partnership as equals with other people in the university who do research, who do base all of their work on a sound knowledge base. So this is really where it becomes very obvious, where Alex and I are not making a claim that we have done all of this. That we have worked, sometimes we have led, sometimes we have supported, sometimes we've worked in collaboration with, or just been involved in and interested in these kinds of areas of work within EAP. And if you think about the diagram, the sort of looking inwards, the work that we felt needed to be done with our profession, it started with developing the curriculum at the University of Leeds, the pre-sessional and the in-sessional work that we do, and really thinking about what that looks like and what principles we base it on. And Alex and I have probably been less involved in that than everybody else in the Language Centre in the last couple of years. But it was something that really needed to be looked at so that we were clear about the principles and the sort of knowledge base that we were drawing on. It's come through the development of the MA in Teaching EAP, because currently there are not very many clear pathways into the profession. There's not many qualifications that are specific. And if you look on our professional body mailing list, constantly there are questions about how do I get into it? I don't know what route I need to take. What qualifications do I need? So by developing an MA, we hope that we are providing practitioners with at least one opportunity. I've worked with Barley, which is our professional body, to I'm currently PEEP officer, which is an accreditation pathway that you can take, sort of a professional development pathway. And then I think the work that Alex has done through his scholarship on developing the profession and really pushing the idea that we owe it to our students to know what we're talking about, to know and understand why we are practicing the way that we do, that we're doing our students a disservice if we are just working experientially without having the evidence and the knowledge to support it. Through doing that, we then need to look outwards into the institution and beyond, because we do work in collaboration. The language work that we do has to be done with other parts of the university. So we need to work, and we have both worked with the various sort of scholarship institutions that are relevant to our practice. So Light, Priya within this faculty and within the school felt we've kind of been worked with throughout. The development of in sessional, which is, I still think, unique to Leeds in the way that we operate through working in real close collaboration and embedded within particular schools, growing numbers of people working on that. And then more recently, thinking, and this is taking us beyond EAP to think about language within the university more broadly, looking at language policy, and that's work that we've kind of all done, I think, within the Language Centre, about what languages are valid and accepted and seen as normative within the university. So that's some kind of idea of the kinds of practices. But as I've said, if we owe students our best knowledge of what we're doing, you can't do that just by practicing. You've got to do the scholarship alongside. And I think the way that we see scholarship is that it comes into and grows out of practice. It's scholarship for rather than on or about the students and the people that we work with. Alex in particular, throughout his career, at least at Leeds, has been asked endlessly to define scholarship. And I think in his most recent publications for the Language Scholar Special Issue, he's written about why he resisted that push to define it specifically, saying that in research, you're never asked to define exactly what research is. It can look different depending on discipline, depending on sort of epistemologies, and it should be the same for scholarship. But consistently, I think in both of our work, if you look at anything that we've written about scholarship, these two quotes from Schulman are the ones that I suppose are kind of ground our ethos about scholarship, that it has to be shared, it has to be public, it has to be asking questions and grounded in doubt. It can't be just a kind of perfect finished product and here you are and off you go. It's about the practice and the mistakes that we make as much as anything. So I'm going to hand back to you now. It's taking more time to the mic than I could say. Pass the mic.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay. So on the screen are some examples of the work we've done either collaboratively or with others. Essentially, we present the work here not as a kind of boast of any kind or celebrating it, but really just as a marker of, I think, our ongoing commitment really to contributing to or advocating for change. We've got a fairly coherent body of work, always pushing in the same direction. These book, which has got the nicest cover, blue one, this is really an important work. It came out of the first Light Fellowship. So there was you and Lydia. I don't know if Lydia's here, but so there were two of them stuck in a building without much really guidance about what constitutes scholarship or investigation. But it gave the respite, which practitioners generally don't do from teaching, take a step back and think. It allowed her to go in university, allowed her to interview students, interview academics, interview colleagues, and gave her some time to develop her ideas so to come to some kind of maturity. The preciousness of that publication is probably less, although I don't want to diminish the publication, is less in what it says, but what it's allowed the language centre to do and to do in terms of the genesis of the idea of embedded in session and so on. So that was an important contribution, I think. The book I did with Ian on operating on the edge or margins of academia was really laying out the kinds of challenges that the profession face. And although it's not always picked up, I sound rather bitter, but the positive aspect of the book about agency, about reflexivity, about what that can enable us to do was perhaps less noted. That body of work for both of us continued in a series with Bloomsbury that I set up with Ian Bruce and Melinda Wong, who used to be the centre director, called New Perspectives, brilliant academic purposes. And the idea there was to give voice and opportunities to practitioners, essentially to see the profession differently, to make the case. A number of edited books came out of that. The interesting thing about it has been trying to get people in those books that you wouldn't hear from normally. So it covers quite a range of geography. You know, you've got practitioners from Zimbabwe, South Africa, Singapore, Hong Kong, Canada, all parts. People that don't usually get a voice in publication. So it was important for me, and I think to tackle those issues as well that are precluded. So with Michelle sitting there, it was kind of her idea, sitting next to some monstrosity of a building, and mentioned something along the lines of be interesting to write something about what the social theory that's implicit in our practices. So the idea is either you can be explicit about social theory, or you can let ideas kind of guide you or dominate your practices. So that was an important one. Bea and Ian contributed and edited a collection on essentially politics and policy in the AP. More recently, with Letitia, who sat there as well, we looked at agency and identity, and again, that took a lot of different perspectives on practitioners. It was, in a way, slightly disappointing that book, because most practitioners, I think it's fair to say, Letitia, looked at identity more than agency. I think you would have preferred more on agency. Millie, who sat over there somewhere, I think, contributed to this series as well with a book on linguistics, and Jean, the first book in this series is on the Good Writing Project, which drew together everyone from Leeds actually was involved in that, but not just from the AP, there were people from linguistics, music, maybe somewhere else. So the series is really trying to give a platform for new ideas and practitioners you wouldn't normally hear from. A couple of little things. Letitia and I have written a book called Recovering Language in Higher Education. This is an extension and perhaps a sense of growing confidence to try and extend our work to a wider audience, looking at ethics, looking at ontologies of language, and the problems of how they interact with social justice. I just want to say, to repeat what Bea said, it's difficult to underestimate the contribution that Ian Bruce has made to the Language Centre. He's been a mentor to me, an inspiration. He embodies a lot of all of it, but he's here at 6 o'clock in the morning. He embodies all the virtues of what you think good academic should be. He's generous, he's kind, he's very thoughtful, very thorough in his work. So it kind of kept me on the straight and narrow in many regards. And he's also been, as Bea said, very discreet and supportive of a number of colleagues. Okay. So, here we go again. It's a bit of a filler.
Is when you realise the tackling approach maybe wasn't the best, especially for this slide, because we were both going to talk about
Yeah.
it, so I don't quite know. I'm dropping it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just hold it like that. So we're pretty much at the end. I can see Alice is panicking about the time. The last thing that we wanted to talk about is ethics, because I think throughout all of the work that we have done, increasingly ethics has become central to the way that we think about it, what we are doing and whether we're doing the right thing. That links to what Alex was saying about reflexivity and the approach that we need to take about understanding what we're doing and whether it fits within sort of our own principles and ethos. I think we started with a slide with Tweedledum and Tweedledee, who were kind of indistinguishable from each other. And we don't want to be seen as indistinguishable. And we work closely together. We sometimes agree, as Tweedledum and Tweedledee did, to disagree and to fight politely. But they kind of do always end up in the same place, agreeing to either disagree or not. And I think with the ethics, that the approach that we've taken and the route we've taken towards sort of the thinking is slightly different, but the result is more or less the same. So we've got sort of ideas from different ways of thinking, different theories here. So I suppose mine is the bottom one, this idea of affirmative ethics that comes from Bradotti, who is post-human in sort of her thinking. But also from the sort of feminist sort of sense of ethics as an ethics of responsibility, that we have a responsibility to do our best for our students and for our colleagues. Sometimes I feel that my sense of ethical responsibility is too great and that maybe I should learn to say no to some things, but I think it's what drives me, this sort of feeling that I have a responsibility to do the right thing for my students, to think about what that is and to learn from my mistakes when I'm working with them constantly, to be aware that I'm not necessarily going to do the right thing all of the time and to listen to what they're saying. I think ethics within the university is really problematic, and quite often you have to be pragmatic about your ethics in order to sort of navigate some of the more problematic decisions and politics around, particularly internationalization, which is kind of the field that and the kinds of students that we tend to work with, and to how we navigate that ethically, I think is something that is a constant sort of right at the forefront of our mind in our practice and in our scholarship. Alex can probably explain this better with more of his words. So I'm going to hand it, and that's it for me now.
What I want to, whoops, that's very loud. I want to talk about ethics as a kind of form of heretical kind of intervention. This may sound a bit pompous, but really it's trying to get at the idea that orthodoxy tends to close things down. When we think about the potential for the future, it's very easy to kind of condemn ourselves to a sense of inevitability. So that in itself is one, depressing, but it also forecloses quite considerably any agency that we might have had that we missed. So heterodoxy and a heretical approach to scholarship is really trying to find openings, it's trying to find new ways, it's trying to think about things differently and more imaginatively. The issue that we do face is, sorry, this is putting me off. We can be stuck in the AP between a very managerial, neoliberal, I'm getting them in, kind of view where it's simply a service industry, a mercantile industry that provides students, provides money for the university. And that's often the case in the UK. EAP centres do exist in these odd spaces like business schools, the registrar's national office. At least we're very lucky in many ways, not always, but in many ways to be part of the school. And that provides a kind of academic home for us. A lot of the EAP centres don't have that. But having had that, we have to find a way, essentially, to kind of navigate between what you might call radical utopias, where values can't really find a world. So we can come up with essentially utopias which are cruel. They're cruel in the sense that we know that they can't be achieved. On the other hand, the other extreme, we've got very cynical, dismissive ideas about what EAP can do. So kind of heretical position is one that needs to be reasonable. And by reasonable, I don't mean moderate, I mean possible. EAP exists in such an uncertain state, and university in general, around redundancies, around the future of languages, all sorts of things. But I think thinking about things differently is urgently needed in terms of what EAP can do, and also language education more generally. For that reason, a kind of heretical approach seems appropriate, it seems reasonable, it seems plausible, given that we can't carry on the way we are. EAP will either tip over the edge into oblivion, private providers avaricious in their desires as much money in students as they can from universities, and language education more generally, as we know in the school, is constantly under a kind of existential threat of closure. That's not psychologically, sociologically, whatever way you want to look at it, that is not a good place to be in. So I think a lot of our work is really about trying to establish kind of ethics of work adherence to support more generally the activities of language education. I will go on to the last slide because time is running out, even though I'm beginning to enjoy myself. This is maybe not the point. So academic language in many ways is difficult, it's full of potential, it's full of problems. But the role of what we do is essentially meaningless. We have to operate with this idea that we have to give our work meaning. It's not inherent in our work, so we have to construct what is meaningful for us, and what we are willing to commit to. EAP will always continue to exist with a kind of existential threat if we don't do something about it. And part of what we're trying to do through scholarship in particular, and the practices around student education, is to give us significant or enough cultural symbolic capital in order to be able to take them seriously within university. Now, we're very lucky at Leeds. We've been very fortunate, the circumstances have been great, but I'm talking about what's across the sector. And for most EAP practitioners, there are very, very few opportunities to develop. There are very clear glass ceilings around promotion. There is no opportunity for scholarship and so on. So I think it's fair to say, in finishing off, we both feel, I've written it down because I wanted to make this clear. We're both painfully aware, and it's without any false modesty, that conditions have been good for us and for our colleagues. We've got rewards and recognitions such as today, which are not readily available to many practitioners in the UK and beyond. So personally, I'm not speaking on behalf of B, although she might agree. I feel quite ambivalent about becoming a professor. Often in my educational history, I felt more of a misfit. Leeds provided me with a kind of home. But we do have some symbolic capital. And I think that both of us will continue to strive for a level playing field for all practitioners. There are a lot of practitioners that are highly talented that should be here and who can't be. I'm going to embarrass B, because it's enjoyable. So I'm going to end by thanking B. I'm not going to look at that because I'll get embarrassed. Essentially for her friendship, her trust, and her collaboration over a number of years. So B is someone I have huge respect for. She's a daily reminder of who we are is ultimately what we care about and what we commit to. So, thank you very much. Thank you.
Actually, thanks. Oh,
Thank you both.
yeah,
It's okay.
I've just been told that the room is booked.
Oh, so we thought we might have time for a quick Q&A, but it looks like we don't have much time. Maybe 10 minutes. Couple of questions? Any questions? So that's right now.
What's
Yeah.
next?
Okay, so question, what's next?
The question is, what's next for us? I think.
Yeah, that's a good question. And so I think for, I've got things that I've got a load of data that I've got to do something with that has been sitting because we do only have 20% of scholarship time as a maximum. So it does take us a long time to get anywhere. So I've got data that's been sitting there for a couple of years that needs looking at, and then also the work I think with other colleagues on language. We're calling it language policy, but we still don't feel comfortable with the word policy. But looking at the use of language across the university, I think it's becoming more pressing, particularly with better artificial intelligence tools and questions around the use of translation and machine translation. It's not something that any of us really feel we have expertise in, but I think the policies within the university are starting to crumble a little bit and nobody quite knows what to do with them. And I think that working with multiple people across the university to look at that it would be the next practice and scholarship based thing for me and for you.
Sorry, I think the 6 shot there. For me, basically working with Ian on this rather interesting but weird book, just trying to draw together the strands of that diagram where you've got the practices and the epistemology in language. That's really difficult work. So that's my next thing. But I think we're both also really looking forward to, and one of the reasons why we did the inauguration, despite our own reservations about it, is because we're lucky to work with a lot of colleagues who have huge potential and already shown that potential. So I think a lot of it will hopefully be continuing to support others as best we can, imperfectly, but doing our best to make sure that they will exceed our contributions. And when we retire, which won't be at the same time because I'm older, but roughly at the same time, it would be kind of hopefully forgotten in some ways. It will be surpassed by our colleagues. But
Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you Alex and Bea for this momentous occasion for the Language Centre. And thank you to Andrew, the Dean, for introducing them. And thank you to everyone online who attended as well. Oh, and there are drinks and
food.
upstairs. So please join us and we can come to the. Thank you.